So we left off last time. We were talking about whether a revenue or a cost were avoidable, and so one thing that we would want to think about is a cost is avoidable if it can be eliminated by choosing a specific option. So a lot of times, if we, for instance, say in the make or buy decision, if we decide to buy something from from an external vendor, a lot of times we can avoid the variable costs of direct materials, and direct labor. Now, um, certainly with the materials we can avoid that. The direct labor, uh, we might not we might be able to avoid direct labor costs per se, but if somebody has a contract and we just say, well, look, we're not going to ask you to produce anything, but well, we're still paying you, that we don't really avoid that cost, because we have to find something else for them to do. And that's, particularly in a case if you have a union environment, you're not going to be able to avoid uh, the variable costs of labor, whether it's direct labor or it becomes indirect because it's not being used directly in the production process. But if we decide to buy from somebody else, we certainly could reduce the amount of direct material costs on our own if we purchase from an external vendor. So this is something that we want to be thinking about here. Certainly, that is going to be the case. Um, Now, I just want to be careful here that we may be able to avoid some fixed costs as well. So So just, a word of caution. Fixed costs may be avoidable under certain circumstances. And that is if we're able to get out of a lease. If, say, for instance, we have rent, but it's more of a month-to-month basis. Well, that might be part of our decision making, whether we want to uh, close a production facility. I mean, these decisions are never easy to do, to determine and decide whether we're going to close a production facility or reduce the number of lines or shifts that are being run. But uh, under those circumstances, the fixed cost for the future, so a fixed cost going forward, may be something that we would contemplate of, well, we might lose less if we don't have this factory, or we don't, or we're able to, able to get out of a lease. It's not, of course, this is something that's not always, exciting to do, or or positive, but it's nevertheless, it's something that businesses need to be wary of. So uh, if the cost, a cost is unavoidable, so you know if it must be incurred regardless of the option. So for instance, here, if we have a fixed, so if we had a fixed labor, or um, you know a contract that is a contract that requires union workers to be compensated regardless. And this could be also something where we have fixed costs uh, of of rent. In contrast to what I was talking about, if we decide if there's a let's say there's a long-term lease on a building, well, that shouldn't influence our decision, but it will certainly, you know, be a cost to us, but it's not something that we're going to be able to change or get out of.